This is Saints Row 2022. We're here on Xbox Series X. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. So this is the, I don't know, semi-long awaited look at what Saints Row has to offer. I wasn't initially going to cover it, and then randomly a code appeared for it. So here we are jumping into the magic that is Saints Row. So I've done basically all of the story. I got to the point where you had to go and grind some boring side missions to do like the final mission. I was just like, not gonna bother. So, anyways, yeah, Saints Row. Let's dive in and take a look at what this game has to offer on the Series X. So the first thing to note is it's kind of like this really weird meh game. It's so down the middle that it's almost offensive at how boring it is. But let's dive into that in a sec here. And let's first talk about the visuals. So this game has a ton of visual display options for you to enjoy alongside HDR support. So this is my preferred mode, 1440p high frame rate. This is what I played the majority of the game using. So everything is uncapped apparently, and every resolution is literally the resolution it tells you. So it's going to be all over the board. If you have a VRR enabled to screen display, you will be able to enjoy a smoother frame rate experience like what I had. So the thing to note is that there are two modes that have ray traced ambient occlusion. So those will look better visually. That is the 1440p high quality and the 1080p high quality mode. So there you go. Those ones have the ray traced ambient occlusion, which is cool. You know, it helps make it more realistic. And you can turn it on or off. So this is actually really good, this game, for the sense of essentially giving us a future-proofed experience. Now, if you're coming here and playing the game now, you're probably going to be like, wow, this is, not the best in many situations, especially if you don't have a VRR-enabled screen going. So keep in mind that when I'm recording this stuff, VRR is not kicking. So we're kind of really seeing what it's like. But yeah, like I said, that 1440p high frame rate mode gives you a decent resolution. It gives you a smooth frame rate with the VRR that I noticed. And I think it's kind of a good way to go. Like, obviously here you can really feel that it's sort of bogging down. And I think driving around is a good showcase, kind of like giving you a little bit of the performance. But on the flip side of that, obviously when there's explosions and combat, lots of things going on, your performance will vary, quite a bit. And this is like a quite varied sort of experience, just because there's so many different visual options. So here you can immediately tell massive degrading of visual fidelity in regards to the resolution quality, but you do get the full sharpness. It looks so kind of fuzzy around the edges and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel like this is too much of a drop. It's neat. And again, I love that this game is offering this many different features in regards to, kind of future-proofing it. But the funny thing is like, despite having all these choices, the backbone here is just like, not really anything to call home about. And I know we've been very focused on the different performance options, but that's literally because that's kind of what I do, is I showcase this aspect and talk about it and give you a little bit of context in regards to the visual settings, just so you can see in action yourself and you can make the choice of like, hey, what visual mode do I want to go for? And this is the 1440p high quality mode. So this one's a little bit higher for resolution, will still give me that ray traced ambient occlusion, but obviously, you're still going to have performance issues, and probably a little bit more than you are if you're going for the 1080p max visuals. It's really hard to find that sort of balance between, hey, I want the game to look good, and hey, I want the game to run well. Which brings us to 1440p high frame rate. I think it's a good option. I think it's a good choice. And I think it offers some stuff for you to do. So let's dive into Saints Row 2022. This is a reboot of the franchise. It's them taking the game in a new direction. And it's just not very good. It's not necessarily like horrific or bad, but it's unpolished. It's buggy. It's got issues. I mean, this is a little bit after launch, so they've been working on things, they've been fixing some things, but it's still buggy, it's still unpolished. And I think, like I was saying earlier, the biggest offensive point to this is it's just not fun. I always really loved the Saints Row games, even the weird ones. You know, Saints Row 4 Re-elected, it's kind of dumb, but it's fun. You get superpowers, you do crazy things. It's enjoyable to me. This one just really isn't enjoyable. It gets rid of a lot of the fun of the series in replacement for, like, you know, constantly talking about student loans or talking about having to pay rent or, you know, how the stock market's all weird these days. It's just kind of sad. And I get, you know, I guess maybe the idea is the humor isn't cool anymore or something. But what we get here is a really just run-of-the-mill, boring, down-the-middle kind of game that doesn't really say anything, doesn't really do anything. I've never really felt, and I don't know if it's something else in my life, maybe in combination of things, I really don't know at this point. I've never played something where I've really felt like I was just going through the motions. And that's what I felt like when I played this game. I was just going through the motions. I was just blankly shooting enemies, blankly engaging with the story. I felt no connection or interest or excitement or joy playing this game. It was really, ultimately, rather boring and, to me, quite disappointing because I really like the Saints Row games. This guy's actually kind of giving me a run for my money here with this this damage he's doing. But, like, I think, again, that's the biggest issue I had, is it's just so boringly down the middle. I think I laughed one genuinely good laugh. There was like a chuckle earlier, but there was one point where I genuinely laughed. And that's when they go and there's like a lawyer. And, you know, the lawyer is doing like a cease and desist thing because, of course, that's a thing in this. And, you know, your character shoots the lawyer and like a cat kind of like goes over the screen. That was the fun. Like, I actually got a good laugh out of that. That was really it. And if you've played Saints Row games, they're really known for their humor. Like, they're funny, you know? And even if they're not funny, they're stupid, enjoyable. Or they're crazy, or they're wild, or you're going, wow, this is insane. But this game, I was just sitting here and I was like, these characters are so boring, these characters are so bland. Like, the one guy, all it is talking about all these different people he slept with the whole time. That's his personality. The other lady, she's just cars. The one guy, he's nerdy and good with finances. And, you know, he doesn't like guns, but then every time you see him, he's got, like, a gun. And you don't get to know the characters. And you don't get to know the struggles, and the story itself is just, like, really weird and really boring. Sorry, that's the controller vibration going off the hook. Let's switch to a different gun for this, just so you don't have to hear that. But that's, like, the biggest thing here, is it's, like, there's no personality, there's no soul to this game. It's just meandering nonsense. It's boring. And honestly, you know, I'd like to have a really balanced opinion on games. I really, really try to. But it's kind of just garbage, honestly. It shouldn't exist because it's just like a soulless kind of take on a like, it basically has become the game that Saints Row used to make fun of. You know, these blank, bland, open-world games where you just do random, nonsensical things. Like, Saints Row used to have a purpose. It used to make fun of things. It used to do stuff or have things to say. And it's just boring. Like, it was so painfully boring, and I was like, who is this written for? There was nothing really funny or engaging or interesting about the story. It was, like, kind of making fun of, like, crazy people that like to kill people, which, you know, would have been more funny in literally any other context, but it's just weird. And you get, like, this big city, and I want to say that this is a big problem for me, too, is you get this big city, but you don't do anything in it. It's so weird. Like, you really don't. Like, if you do the main missions, or you do the side missions, like some of the character missions and whatnot, and you go about, you don't really see anything. You're always sent off the map to do things, or you're always sent to go do something somewhere else. But I remember in the older Saints Row games that I really got to know the city. And I kind of drive through here, and there's a lot of places where I'm like, I haven't seen this, I haven't been... Like, you have to go out of your way and maybe do a lot of side missions before you can even really engage in the open world. And the open world itself is really just ugly. Like, there's some moments where you're doing campaign missions where you're like, well, this is kind of beautiful looking. But then as you're moving around, you see it like it's a really last-gen feeling open world. Like, the color palette is really bland and orange, and it kind of just looks really, really ugly. Tons of pop-in, stuff appearing. Like, I'll be driving in traffic, and cars in front of me will just completely vanish, out of nowhere. Like, I'll be like, what happened to that car? Where'd that car go? What happened to this? And I know it's not like necessarily like a big thing, but it's just like this whole set of combinations of things where you're like, this just makes it worse and worse and worse, and soulless and more soulless. Like, developers spent time making this world, putting time into like, the finer details of it, but you don't really see anything. You don't really engage with anything. And it's just kind of really genuinely disappointing that a world that looks like, people put time into to design, to create, that there's just nothing really going on in it. And it's just straight up bizarre that this is the direction they took for this series. You're basically moving through this soulless world, doing soulless activities that I don't find very engaging or very exciting. And to me, that's really sad, because the Saints Row series was always funny. It was always weird. And, I could see a lot of people being like, as it got more crazy, the fun kind of, like, wasn't there for everyone. That's totally fair. You wanted a more grounded Saints Row game. But I think what they really did here was just kind of go all the way in the direction of being something that was completely inoffensive or completely uninteresting to everyone. Because I kept sitting there while I was playing the story, and I was like, who is this written for? Like, who wrote this garbage nonsense? Like, it was just the stupidest stuff in the world, but you were doing these missions. You were doing, like, just a bland assortment of, like, best of gaming hits, You're on a train, or you're doing a driving sequence, or you're having a laugh. Oh, enemies attacked you. And it's just, like, the main cast, like I was saying, is just really not that interesting or engaging. And your main character too, like, there's tons of customization. You can make whatever kind of main character you want. That's cool. That's well done. I'll give them that. Character customization, go nuts. That's what Saints Row is supposed to have. Lots of weird customization stuff. But even like the enemies, despite having like a three-way, kind of battle going on here, or well, I guess even more. There's these guys, the idols, and then there's Marshall, which is like a modern military sim that you're working for at the beginning, and somehow you're friends with people that are part of all the different like clubs or whatever, and you all kind of the different factions, and you all somehow are friends that can't afford an apartment but still have an apartment. Like, you can't buy it. Like, they're trying to get money to pay for a toaster, and they can't scrounge up like more than $30 for a toaster, but yet they have rent and like a decently large pad. It's really nonsensical, the whole thing. Like, I think the idea was like, hey kids, you're struggling in life to be able to get anything or afford anything. We get that too, right, bro? And it's just terrible. Like, I don't, like, there wasn't, like, sometimes with the comedy and stuff of video games, they try to hit like key points of, hey, a comment on society or something like this. But it was more like, one of those, hey, cool kids, I get what you're dealing with kind of things. And it was kind of, like, insulting almost. Like, that's the biggest thing here, is it's so boring and bland that to me it becomes ultimately quite insulting, because it's just, there's no chances taken, but at the same time, they've created such a boring-ass world to, like, go through and see. Like, it's just, it really sucks. And there was no, like, action-packed moments. Like, I love in the other Saints Row games that, you get those laughs, you get those crazy moments, you get those big booms, but there's also moments where you feel like a tough battle, like you feel like the boss. And I think the concept here of being like, hey, we're building the Saints for the first time, that's kind of interesting. Seeing how the group would come together, the branding and all that, neat concept, but the execution here is just so pointless, to the point that what were they hoping to accomplish with this game? Like, who did they think would be excited by this? And I know some people are like, oh, it's just Saints Row, and it is kind of just Saints Row, but like, they've taken all the soul and the heart and the intrigue of the series, and they've thrown it aside for something that's just bland and disinteresting and boring. And I think, to me, that is a huge disappointment, because the series used to really be like, you know, hey, there's a lot of, you know, open world games out there that are silly like this. You know, Grand Theft Auto is huge. Let's make fun of that. Let's parody it. Let's do something different with it. And to see the franchise at this point come back and end up like this, to me, is the worst case scenario. Because obviously the people that are designing this have no idea what Saints Row is. Like, they obviously don't get it. Like, I'm playing this game here. Like, this looks like a modern Saints Row. Well, kind of looks more like a last-gen Saints Row. Let's be real here. The visuals really aren't anything to go call home about. But, like, when you're playing it, it's absolutely soulless and lifeless. Like, I'm just, as I said earlier, I'm going through the motions of playing this game, and it just doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't excite me. Like, this is just kind of boring. And, you know, they do have story content, and they do have explosions, but it's just weirdly bad in so many ways. And then there's, like, you know, there's like these perk systems, not really anything too interested. And there's like some wanted stuff you can go do, and there's like a photo mode, I guess. But, like, I'm just kind of talking about like little side features. Like, once, even like the world itself, you know, you see all these like activities, and you can set up like Saints businesses in different places to do more missions. But, like, it feels like they just came up with like the bare minimum. Like, they made this large world, and they're like, alright, what do we do with it? And they're like, I don't know, let's just put some stuff together. It's really weird. It's like this disconnect, because, again, you don't get to know this world. Whenever I played any of the Saints Row games, I was really familiar with the areas. And I know it's kind of funny, because it's like, well, you know, we were in, like, you know, the same city however many times, but you know what I mean? Like, you, in each of those games, you see the differences, you see the different parts of the city, you feel engaged with the city, and it has its own, like, personality to it. And they've completely removed that from this. And it's just like, you know, I can't believe that we've gotten to a point where Saints Row, a series of enjoyment and fun, and, you know, something that, like, hey, you want to take it seriously, sure, why not? But, you know, then you're running around with a giant kind of phallus-shaped bat, and you don't even really see anything like that in this game. Like, I think they were trying to be like, oh, that humor doesn't work today or something. Like, they're better than the franchise this comes from? It's really just, like, kind of insulting to fans and stuff, saying that, like, hey, that stuff was just, you know, like, you can modernize your humor. You shouldn't be, like, you know, necessarily, I guess maybe say punching down, or you shouldn't be trying to, like, attack anyone or anything. I'm not saying that. And maybe some of the concepts didn't keep up, but it feels like they basically took every, like, weird, mature adult aspect of the series, and it's like, that doesn't work anymore. Or we're not even going to try to adapt that, or even try to come up with something new. We're just going to provide you with another soulless open world shooter game with the Saints Row name stapled on top of it. Like, you could have called this, I don't know, Automobile Taker, or, you know, Extreme Shooter, or Mobster Life, or Gangster Life. You could have attached any bland name to it, and it really wouldn't make a difference. You just get rid of the Saints title. There's nothing in this that feels like Saints Row. Like, the characters, the club you put together, none of it actually feels like a Saints Row game. It's just really, really, I think, insulting to the fan base and to the players that, like, care about this franchise to any degree. I'm not saying it's some kind of, like, you know, high-level bastion of, you know, gaming. You know, it's not like it's a sacred series. There's room to reboot this franchise and make it work, but this is just terrible. And it's terrible not in the way that it's, like, you know, unplayable. Like, you could play through this. I played through it. You know, it was fine. Some of the checkpoints are a little aggressively hard, to be honest, but, you know, the missions aren't very long, so I guess it's not a big deal, and once you upgrade some guns, you're like, psh, whatever. But it's just like, there's nothing really exciting to say about this game. Sure, it plays. Sure, it runs, you know. And yeah, it's story content, it's something to do. But to call this a Saints Row game, I don't think so. It's just not good.